Good morning, students. This Ed Puzzle is to help you get through the notes on pages 76 through 79 on industrialization. The topic today is industrialization and the rise of organized labor. Due to copyright laws, I cannot project the text. So you should go to page 76 right now, and we are going to start with the text that's underneath the two dark boxes that say, after reading this chapter, you should be able to. And I'm going to complete the graphic organizer with you as I read. Your job is to follow along in the text. And when it comes time to write down the notes, hit pause and write in the notes. So the content statement today is the rise of industrialization led to a rapidly expanding workforce. Labor organizations grew amidst unregulated work conditions, laissez-faire policies towards big business, and violence towards supporters of organized labor. So the conditions of labor, right above that I'm reading, the rise of industrialization in the United States in the late 1800s and early 1900s had both social and economic effects. With growing demand for factory workers, immigrants came to America to take jobs and settle into major industrial cities. The conditions of labor. One important factor behind America's astonishing economic growth in the late 19th century was the increasing exploitation of its industrial workers. Long hours and low wages. The average workday and work week were long by today's standards, 10 to 14 hours a day for 6 days a week. Employers hired the least expensive laborers. Pay averaged from $3 to $12 weekly, but immigrants were often willing to work for far less. Women and children were also frequently employed as low paid workers. So the conditions of labor were long hours and low wages. So I'm going to say people worked 10 to 14 hours for low wages. Oops, not wages, wages. Children, immigrants, and women paid less. Businesses hired least expensive to pay. All right, as I clean this up, please hit pause and write down those notes. When you're done, unpause the video. Poor conditions, boring and repetitive tasks. As factories and workplaces grew larger, jobs were offered on a take it or leave it basis. As industrialists sought greater speed and efficiency, workers became nothing more than a human cog in a vast machine. Work became less skilled and more repetitive and boring. Industrial working conditions were often hazardous. Safeguards around machinery were inadequate. Thousands of workers were injured, maimed, or killed in industrial accidents each year. By 1900, factories were extremely dangerous by modern standards. Factory machines and power sources were often left unguarded. Factory managers showed little interest in improving safety, since rising profits encouraged factory managers to push their workers for even greater output. So work was boring, repetitive, working conditions were dangerous. Factory managers were not interested in making the workplace safe. And that's because that cost money, and they were not interested in spending more money. They really wanted to get the cheapest workers to do the most dangerous work for very little pay. All right, go ahead and hit pause while I clean this up. And how about I go ahead and add bullet points here to make it nice and clean. There we go. Okay, so hit pause if you still need to take the notes. Child labor. Textile mills and coal mines made use of child labor to perform special tasks. Machinery was rarely fenced off, and children were often exposed to the moving parts of machines as they worked. Children might be used to move, clean, or fix large machines since they were small enough to fit between the parts. About one-fifth of all American children worked outside the home in 1910. These children missed sunshine, fresh air, play, and the chance to improve their lives by attending school. So, child labor used to perform specific tasks like fitting into small spaces using little hands to get into tight machinery. Machines were dangerous for young people. About one-fifth of children worked in 1910. That's a lot. A lot of kids. Oops, I got a backspace here. So you can go ahead and hit pause while I clean this up and take the notes. All right, next, I'll go ahead and hit bold and get these pretty purple here. All right. Lack of job security. Workers could be fired at any time for no reason. Since most work was unskilled, workers could easily be replaced. Employers dictated pay and working conditions. In bad times or during times of economic slowdown, manufacturers simply halted production and fired their employees. Workers lacked any benefits enjoyed by factory workers today, such as unemployment insurance, workers' compensation for injuries on the job, paid sick days, and vacation. So workers could be fired and replaced at any time for any reason. So, no sick leave, unemployment, insurance, vacations, workers' compensation for injury. So basically, if you got sick or hurt on the job, it was, tough luck. You could lose your job. So people came to work sick, people came to work injured, and if you were injured beyond the capability of coming to work, now you had no way to support your family. So the rise of organized labor. Government policies and the formation of monopolies and trusts led to rising conflicts between corporations and labor. As a result of this poor and working conditions, some groups of workers formed labor unions or organizations called unions to protect their rights. Workers formed unions to act as a large group, which they felt provided more power than acting as individuals. They sought to address the issues such as working conditions, wages, safety, and their terms of employment. Labor organizations also grew due to the violence towards supporters of organized labor. Okay, so a union, let me go ahead and make it purple for you. So what's a union? It was a labor organization to protect the rights of the workers. All right. And worked for safe working conditions, higher wages, shorter hours, etc. Okay, so let's move on to read about the Knights of Labor. Let's see, and here we go. All right, so now I'm reading under Workers Seek a National Voice. In 1869, the Knights of Labor was created as a single national union for all skilled and unskilled workers. The Knights demanded 8-hour workdays, higher wages, and safety codes in factories. They opposed child labor and supported equal pay for women. They also sought restrictions on immigration since they saw immigrants as competitors for their jobs who would work for less money. Okay, so Knights of Labor, single union for all skilled and unskilled workers. 8-hour workday, higher wages, safety codes in workplace. Let's see, opposed child labor, supported equal pay for women, and supported immigration restrictions because they wanted to keep the jobs for Americans, not for immigrants, because immigrants worked for less money. All right, now let's talk about Terence Powderly. Under the leadership of Terence Powderly, the Knights of Labor grew rapidly in the 1800s, but the Knights proved to be too loosely organized. Skilled workers resented being in the same union as unskilled laborers. After losing a series of major strikes, the Knights of Labor fell apart. Leadership of the, we'll do a little abbreviation, Knights of Labor grew under him. Too loosely organized, skilled, did not like being with unskilled. All right, I'm going to go ahead and make that bold. And here we go. Let me do this real quick. This might make my life a bit easier if I do this. I do bold, purple, and there we go. All right, the Homestead Strike of 1892. Wealthy industrialists like Andrew Carnegie used immigrant workers or would close factories rather than negotiate with worker unions. In 1892, striking union members and hired company security forces fought against each other at Carnegie's Homestead Steel Plant. The Homestead Strike of 1892 inspired union workers, but also underscored how difficult it was for any union to prevail against powerful, wealthy corporations and the federal government. All of the Homestead Strike leaders were blacklisted. The Carnegie Steel Company was successfully able to prevent a union from organizing Homestead workers. Unions were reduced to minor faction in the steel mills through the Pittsburgh area. So Carnegie and the Homestead Steel Factory in Pittsburgh, PA. Did I spell that right? There we go. Okay, workers strike. Leaders were blacklisted, which means they couldn't be hired anywhere else. Wealthy corporations and the federal government stopped strikes. All right, gonna go ahead and, all right, Andrew Carnegie. So he was from reading this, wealthy industrialist, Homestead Steel owner. Hang on real quick. I'm sorry. sorry about the interruption. Okay, so the American Railway Union was founded in 1893, led by Eugene V. Debs, a socialist. They soon became the nation's largest organized union. They welcomed railway workers, except for those above the ranks of foremen. In 1894, a boycott by the union against the Pullman Company led to a strike against the railroads. The strike soon turned violent. President Cleveland ordered federal troops sent in to break the back of the strike. A railroad yard was burned, 26 civilians were killed. Debs was arrested, jailed, and soon the union fell apart. Okay, so the American Railway Union. Okay. So, founded in 1893, became nation's largest union. Railway workers were represented. A boycott against Pullman Company led to a strike. Strike was violent, and President Cleveland sent federal troops to break the strike. So you can see here that in two instances now, the federal government got involved on the side of big business. So Eugene V. Debs, we'll hear about him quite a few times in this class. So he was a socialist leader of the American Railway Union, jailed after the Pullman. Great. All right, let's go ahead and move on. So at any time you hit pause so that you can get the notes down. The Pullman Company, we're going to go with, how about this? We're just going to put those notes there, okay? So if you already wrote the notes up here, you can go ahead and draw a line to there. All right, the American Federation of Labor was founded by Samuel Gompers in 1881. Gompers created a powerful union by uniting workers with similar economic interests. So we're going to skip down here, make this easy. Led the AFL, made a united similar workers, we're going to say. Oops. United Similar Workers. All right, now let's see what the AFL did here. So the AFL consisted of several separate unions of skilled workers who had joined together in a federation, the AFL. So several separate unions of skilled workers, limited to skilled workers, sought higher pay, 8-hour work day, better working conditions, and job security. Is that right? Security. Very good. All right, we've already got Samuel Gompers done. Whoops, period. All right, the Industrial Workers of the World was established in 1905 by groups that opposed the AFL. So we're going to go ahead and pop that in there because that's important to know. Opposed the American Federation of Labor. They organized unskilled factory workers. And they sought pay increases, shorter working hours, and safer working conditions. Pay increase, shorter work hours, and safer Okay, very good. I'm going to go ahead and do this. Little fun fact, they were also called the Wobblies. So the IWW was organized on a class basis, welcoming all kinds of workers, including immigrants, minorities, women, and unemployed. They would often use strike boycotts to slow down and slowdowns to achieve their end. So included immigrants, women, unemployed, used strikes to achieve their ends. All right. So now we're going to move on to the government's attitude towards labor and bring this home. Let me go ahead and make this bold and purple. Whoops. Yep. Very good. All right. So let's take a look at government's attitudes towards unions. In 1886, a labor protest near Chicago's Haymarket Square turned into a riot after someone threw a bomb at police. 7 policemen were killed and 67 others were severely wounded. Labor leaders were blamed for the Haymarket riot. It became a major setback for the organized labor movement. The riot confirmed to government officials that unions were bad for the U.S. economy and were being led by anarchists. The incident supported government leaders' belief that the business needed protection and unions were being opposed. Okay, so the Haymarket riot became, it was in Chicago. Haymarket. We're going to learn a little bit more about this later this week. Square turned violent when someone threw a bomb. Setback to labor movement. Unions were branded bad for economy and were led by anarchists. So anarchists are people who believe in like no government, that the government should not control, make laws, that you don't want those kinds of, you don't want those rules to keep people from doing the right thing. So anarchists, kind of like socialists, were kind of a unfavorable way to have views about the government. So business leaders often contributed heavily to political campaign funds. Moreover, many politicians shared the same outlook as business leaders. For this reason, federal government officials favored a laissez-faire, hands-off policy towards big business in America. They saw successful businesses as responsible for American prosperity and viewed union workers' demands as greedy. Between 1800 and 1900, there were more than 20,000 strikes involving 6 million workers. So what does it mean? It means hands off, literally. And what it really means is the government does not interfere with regulating big business. And again, we have to keep in mind that big businesses gave money to politicians or political campaigns. So if people wanted to get elected, they needed to be on the side of big business, because the big business would give money to run a good campaign so that you could win. And then while you were in office, you couldn't just go back on your word. You had to do what big business wanted you to do, or you would not get reelected. So big business, government saw big business as making you prosperous. All right. I say saw. Okay, oops, not a big W. Okay, and I'm going to read the rest. Union activities were closely associated with violence and radicalism. Government leaders feared the disruptive effects of strikes on the American economy. In 1895, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that unions were illegal because they restrained trade. This ruling encouraged government leaders to use troops to put down strikes and restore order. Public opinion also favored laissez-faire policies. Many Americans believe that businesses should have the right to hire and fire employees as they pleased. Many in the public were hostile to unions because they feared workers' wage demands would only serve to bring about higher prices for consumers. So I'm going to put another little tab under here and say that strikes disrupted trade and government ruled that this made unions illegal. We'll go with also here. So I want to go back one. Public feared worker demand would drive up prices for consumers. Okay, so the idea is if the workers were making more money, then they would have to charge more for products, and the public did not want prices to go out of control. All right, so we are done with the notes, and go ahead and turn them in and do the questions now on pages 80 to 81. Thank you.